Recruitment costs money. Are you willing to lose talent that you've invested in? There's a lot of things you don't really consider when you talk about bringing new people into the industry. The broadcast industry has been, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You hear a lot of people saying, back in my day, we just used to knock on the door and go and get a job as a runner. People don't want to do that anymore. You need to remove barriers to entry. Not everybody has a degree in engineering.
How do we be more inclusive?
Training your staff how to perhaps even just be patient with an 18-year-old. There's no stupid questions. There are only those who know and those who don't. If you're neurodiverse, how can we capture increased productivity?
You've officially been diagnosed with ADHD. How has the diagnosis helped you?
It's been life-changing. To be misdiagnosed for 13 years with anxiety and depression is very intense, because you start to wonder, will I ever be happy again? Once you start to understand why these things are happening, you can take the emotion away. As a manager, you have a duty of care to support the people that work into you. If you want to get the best value out of them, then my belief is you need to.
Today, I'm here to discuss these trends with someone who is deeply passionate about diversity and inclusion. She started her career on a degree apprenticeship scheme and has since gained a wealth of broadcast experience. Now working a full-time job while being a full-time mother, and recently being diagnosed with ADHD. She is a woman in broadcast, but the question is, will she rise up to the challenge? I'm here with Natasha Jones. Right, can I just say before we start this podcast that I'm extremely upset with you for nicking my chair, because that is the host seat, and for consistency for every single episode, I'm meant to sit there. But you don't appreciate the privilege you have by being able to swindle me and take my seat. Mm-hmm. So you're welcome.
Thank you.
No one else is going to get this privilege.
Fantastic.
Okay, moving on to my first question.
Go on.
Does it actually matter, diversity and inclusion?
Of course it does.
And why?
Increase productivity, they increase morale. When you're looking at the industry that we're serving, you know, we have a diverse audience. And how can we properly relate and engage with them if we're just a bunch of the same people on this side of the camera? How can we get all viewpoints, all angles? How can we capture diverse thinking and new ways of working? People have very, very different ways of thinking. Some people are very literal, and some are very, very, outside the box and like to think of new ways. And if you don't have a diverse approach, then
you're just going to do the same thing.
Of course, yeah.
I guess I want to start by rewinding to the start of your career journey, and in fact it's similar to mine, the degree apprenticeship program. Getting talented people into the industry is those kinds of schemes where they're entry-level roles. Could you maybe talk about how this scheme has been beneficial to you and what's your journey been like so far?
I think there's a lot of things you don't really consider when you talk about bringing new people into the industry. You're not necessarily just shaping them to be a broadcast engineer or a technical consultant or a sales specialist or whatever. You're shaping them to be the human and the adult that they become. And I think one of the first and most important lessons I learned was professionalism. I think that was probably one of the most important things, and how to communicate with people appropriately. From the north, and I worked in a bookies beforehand. And so I could say the banter was different up there. And so that was a really steep learning curve for me in terms of how I conducted myself and how my confidence to approach people. And as you go around the teams, not only are you learning new skills and new parts of the industry, but you're also continuously meeting new people, continuously learning how to ask questions. And sometimes people don't always receive those questions the same. Some people are very open, and I'm someone who asks a lot of questions. I'm someone who doesn't like to just
you won't
accept.
Stop until you know everything.
Until my understanding is clear within my own brain. And one thing you learn is that some people are more receptive to those questions than others. And I think once you get people who are well established in their career, sometimes the stupid questions, and I say stupid because I think somebody said something to me once, there are no stupid questions, there are only those who know and those who don't. That kind of gave me the confidence to keep asking, but I think sometimes the people who are more well established, they might not necessarily receive those stupid questions as well. And sometimes that can put the fear of God into you for asking those questions again. And you come across other people, they will embrace every variation of question that you ask in order to sort of help you grasp where you want to be and where you are.
Do you almost feel like when we were on the apprenticeship scheme that it was a bit of a safety blanket that you could explore more and ask anything you wanted?
Yeah, 100%. The freedom that the scheme gave us, so it wasn't just 6 monthly rotations, and that was in product, sales, that was in the TC team, which
is the technical consultants team for an acronym. You've been in this industry too long, you're already using the acronyms. What do you think some of the main benefits of a degree apprenticeship scheme, for example, is?
3 things. The first is the freedom to be able to learn. You are embraced as a blank canvas coming into that role. You can shape your path and you can find your passion. As again, some of the things that you don't really necessarily appreciate at the time is the amount of opportunities you get. At the time, organising work experience could be tedious, maybe fair to say. The actual opportunities to meet everybody individually in those teams and just to talk to them and get your face out there, was really, really important. And going to the events, again, it was this comfort blanket of, we can go to a customer site and we can ask the stupid questions. Just had the freedom to just, reach out to so many places, go and see so many cool sites. And
it was one of those opportunities that I feel like it gave you an excuse to talk to people while you were still learning. Yeah.
But one thing that I have learned coming off the scheme, just because you're not an apprentice anymore, just because you're not a grad or on a learning scheme, it doesn't mean that you have to stop seeking out opportunities to grow. Yeah. And
you never stop learning. Right?
No, of course you don't. And in fact, everyone will say, the older you get, the less you realise you know. And that is very, very true. The difference is being in a place that encourages you to do so. My manager has always encouraged me to seek, those things that make me tick. The second thing is it's meeting people. It's learning how to interact with people and be surrounded by the other people within your industry who can answer those questions in a way where you might not get so much value in a classroom is really, really important. It's very different than sitting in a classroom with a tutor and seeing things happening and just hearing chit-chat. It doesn't have to be hearing what happens when things go wrong. Not everything always goes right. So what's happening when things go wrong? How does the business handle it? I think the third thing is you come out with a qualification that's recognised. For me, the journey to get there wasn't as hard because I wasn't sat in a classroom the entire time, or barely at all.
I mean, I always personally struggled trying to learn in the classroom environment and then going through the exams as well. Now you're getting this practical real world experience, and a lot of it's more interactive because you're having conversations with people and then you're immediately going and doing the work. Yeah. What you just learned, you're now implementing on a task. So
and
it's different.
Your actions have real life consequences.
Yeah. Not in a playground anymore.
No, and that can be scary. That can be scary, but also very, very exciting. Yeah, we were trusted. We were given responsibility, and we were trusted. And I'd like to say we were equipped with the appropriate tools so it didn't go wrong. You know, we're dealing with some very high tier broadcasters that would be very, very sad if they thought for a second their workflows could be impacted by someone perhaps not quite qualified. But we have, not only were we given the tools, trusted. We have a fantastic team around us. I can't count on both hands and more, on all the toes, like how many people that I can go to when I have a question or something I don't understand. The team are fantastic, and you just don't. If you come out with a degree, you're expected to know. If you go into an industry with a degree, it almost feels like there is a different expectation of you're in an apprenticeship scheme, you're given, it does feel safe.
Yeah.
It feels supportive, feels like a fantastic environment, and it always has and always still does.
Some people do degrees that are just completely irrelevant to broadcast, for example. So why would you be expected to know? But I guess what the graduates have had more kind of core skills, which soft skills. They have more like soft skills, I think, from when at least for me, when I joined when I was 18. Yes. Bloody hell, I'm old. That was nearly a decade ago. Why do you think it's so important that people in their early careers can attend events like the DPP Tech Leaders Briefing, IBC, SVG, RISE, and so on?
We are such a small part of this industry, and that would be the same for anyone individually. You have to get out there and see different broadcast manufacturers, production companies, broadcast companies. Everybody's doing something differently. Everybody sees things in a different way. By getting out there and being present, and not just as early career, but anyone being there, being present, getting the confidence to talk to people, getting the confidence to ask the questions, and sometimes knowing how to ask a question. Because you sometimes you don't know enough that you can even ask that first question. You don't know how to position it. And the more you're around that stuff, the more confident you become. It's not just a personal benefit, but it's a benefit within your business as well. Because when you've got people who are asking the relevant questions or who are challenging their own understanding, but it takes people a while to get to that point to be able to do it.
If I have no idea about the subject matter and I don't know what my first few questions are, how do I approach that conversation?
Good question. Tell me more.
Just listen.
Just say, please can you explain this to me? I don't understand.
If you've never done that before, that can feel quite daunting.
Yeah, it can.
And then you do that enough times and you're just like, you're numb to it.
Please can you show me? Can I see how this works?
Yeah.
And they'll say, "Oh, just tell me if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, or if you already know all of this stuff." Say, I'm not saying I know anything even, but just for you, pretend I know nothing. Tell me how you want to tell me. They'll go right back to basics, and they'll build it up for you again and again. And the more you hear different people introduce something to you and in different ways, it's all foundations for building your own understanding, and how you would explain it would be totally different. It's quite exciting. I like doing that stuff. Talking about confidence is quite people would probably see me as quite a confident person. I could heavily argue that. Heavily.
Yeah. I can just tell, that you are just a brute force.
Ouch.
Just don't care. You're just bombarding through with your sheer confidence there. I don't know how you do it. But you're saying internally you don't have it, but I think externally you've nailed it down. Well, what you're saying, you implement.
Because it's a plan. I think for me, I've always had to have a plan. The plan is, I'm in an uncomfortable situation here. How do I navigate it? The plan is people like talking. People like telling you stuff. So ask questions. I like learning. It's a plan. Once you've got a plan, it works.
We need more plans. That's what I'm taking from that. I need a plan.
And it's not a what am I going to get out of this interaction. That's not really how I approach them. Perhaps that's where I don't feel very confident, because for me at the moment, it's about creating that interaction. It's about learning what questions are being asked. It's about learning what questions need to be asked, understanding the industry as much as I can. I put myself in other people's shoes a lot. And I think about the people stood on a stand all day. Everyone stood around networking, and not a lot of people go over to the stands. And some people do, but they're not busy all day. So just go for a chat. Go say hello.
If you go to an event with an intention of finding out about X, Y, and Z, and you don't have those spontaneous conversations, you might completely miss out on some value you never thought was there, but actually is. If
I ever go to an event with a plan, I find I get far less.
But you just said we need to have a plan.
No, but so the plans are different, right? your plan is unknown. Your plan is I need to go and find this out.
So it's still a plan.
But it's still a plan.
My plan is not to have a plan.
I need to. My plan is
This is a minefield.
It's how do I react in certain situations? I plan for situations, not for outcomes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So with ADHD, working memory is not always the best. Being able to recall information you've just been told can sometimes be a bit difficult. And I'm not going to about to approach somebody with a pen and paper and start jotting down everything they say. So tell me about you. Tell me something that you find interesting. Tell me, once you start that and you find someone's passion, it becomes a lot less monotonous and it becomes more engaged. And once I start engaging, then I start to really be able to retain information and I'm really focused. Yeah. If I go in with hi, I just want to talk to you about one thing, everything else you say to me becomes dust. And then me really trying to focus on that one thing that you're saying to me doesn't register. I can't retain it. And then I'll go away and quickly try to scribble anything down and it just wouldn't go in. So for me, if I can get to a point where it becomes an engaged conversation where there's passion and the conversation's flowing, then I'm like, sound, I'm in, I'm game, I'm engaged, I'm loving this. And I can go for probably way too long.
See, the irony of this is we didn't plan to have that conversation point and I'm very engaged. So, you've completed your 4-year degree apprenticeship program and now you are a fully fledged, experienced technical consultant and member of the team. Then, of course, you welcomed your daughter into the world and took a year of maternity leave. Could you share what your experience was like integrating yourself back into the workplace?
So BT offer 10 keep in touch days and they can be anything from team building, just reintegrating back in with the team. They can be customer events, they can be training. And I tried to use as many of them as I could. Originally, I went for a day. I was in and out in a day. Didn't want to be away from the little one too long. And then I did one night, came back the next morning. And then I did one night, but 2 full days. And I just increased it until IBC. IBC was the big one, sort of came back and 3 nights in Amsterdam, 3 nights, 4 days.
For those who don't know, that's one of the biggest events in the broadcast industry.
Yeah, that was 4 days that I was away from home and 3 nights. And again, everyone will have different ways, but for me, I knew that I needed to see what it looked like. I needed to have structure and routine in starting. It's not just getting on a train and travelling and going to a place. It was planning, it was structure, it was using the tools that were given to me by my organisation of keep in touch days, which are paid as well. It was just good to be back with my team, back with people. And to be honest, it was incredibly overwhelming. Every time I came back in, I was getting migraines, like the lights, the noise, the people, and I was almost running away. Like I was for somebody who is quite outgoing and quite social, by 7 o'clock I was spent. Just being in that environment all day was very intense at the start. But again, gradually building that up is something I recognised I needed to do, and I'm really, really glad that I did it the way that I did. I think I've noticed that at IBC, it's intense, and I didn't necessarily feel it before.
In what way?
In a way where I've just been at home in my house for pretty much the past 3 years because of the C word. I'm becoming a mum and just kind of became a bit of a hermit when I was pregnant, you know. I didn't venture out much, and so 3 years of just being at home for someone who's probably quite outgoing, and then going into an event with 43,000 people is pretty intense. And also, I think you see the world differently when you come back from maternity leave, because different information becomes important now. You know, you've gone from a year of, oh, they took their first steps on this date, and this is the information you've been retaining for the past year, or, you know, they've eaten this foods, or, you know, is it cooked soft enough, or... And you go from all of this back to straight into, okay, we're back in the broadcast industry again now. All of these technologies that are ever sort of growing and evolving, and the conversation's always changing.
Do you feel like it just came back to you Did you remember things, or had it like changed drastically?
No, I don't think it changed drastically. I think it would take anyone time to find their feet, but I think it entirely depends how much sleep you've had the night before. You know, you've still got a 1-year-old at home.
Yeah.
So, you know, how much sleep you've had, I think that plays a big factor into it. But generally, I think a year off didn't change too much.
How do you juggle 2 jobs, basically? Because it is 2 full-time jobs, right?
I'm always quite torn with this question because I have a wealth of support back home that allows me to embrace a career, and what that might look like is choice. You know, there's never anyone forcing something sharp into my back and making me be there. It's me wanting to be there. People ask you questions that they might not necessarily ask your male colleagues. Who's looking after the baby? I had a comment. I made a passive joke, you know. It wasn't much. It was, you know, you wouldn't think I have a 1-year-old at home because I was away all the time. And I think it was the response that shocked me, and I should probably expected it, you know. Well, it wasn't a bad one, but it was, no, you wouldn't. And I was like, ouch. And it was probably just me taking things too sensitively, but it was almost, how do people perceive me? And so listening to this podcast, the Silent Partners, it's about stay-at-home parents who have extremely successful partners in sort of C-suite positions, exec positions, things like that. There's one of them, the guy was like, well, yeah, I always knew I was going to stay at home and I wasn't bothered about that. And, you know, we sort of expected it. I guess it just brought me comfort that there are other women out there who have achieved successful careers.
Yeah.
But the partner, the silent partner in that position is always supportive. And, you know, in our case, it's not just dad, it's dad and Nana and Gigi. When I'm away, you know, have some serious rotation. Gran Gigi.
In the context then of the skills crisis, why do you think it's important that we allow people to take career breaks to retain those skills?
I think giving people the time and space to discover themselves and, you know, live out a part of their life that is important to them, whether that be travelling, whether that be having a baby. For some reason, I can't think of any other examples why you'd have a career break. But, you know, especially where we're in a society where you're in education till you're 18, and then there's almost this instant expectation. Well, no one's got any money, right, to just go and start travelling. And so people need, you know, it's almost an instant you need to get into work. And then there's almost this pressure that, you know, if you want to travel, you've either got to travel before you have a family or after you have a family, if family's on the cards, or it might not be. Allowing people space to reinvent themselves, take a break, have a think about, you know, what works best for them, I think is really important. I have changed a lot since I was on maternity leave, and I can't speak the same for travelling, but knowing a lot of people who are travelling, it's game-changing for them. Seeing the impact it has on their life and the way that it changes their outlook and the opportunities for them, the lived experience and the happiness brings a more well-rounded person back into your organisation. If people want to take time out, they're going to do it anyway. And if that's a case of either them leaving or them taking a few months out, I guess the question is, in that time, could the organisation fill that role and get that same person up to the same level of experience within the short time frame that someone's been away? If within that time frame you think you're going to be able to recruit somebody, upskill them, recruitment costs money. Are you willing to lose talent that you've invested in for the sake of them living an experience before it gets busy, it gets manic, when you start buying houses and cars and have children and things, you know, families come into the equation.
And then all of a sudden you're 50 years old.
And you've still not been travelling. I can't imagine not of having had a job to come back to when I've gone away to do something that enhances my personal life.
So we talked about degree apprenticeships. I think it's amazing. One of the best pathways, and I'll say that knowing I'm incredibly biased because I did it. But what other pathways do you think this industry should be implementing, or what other pathways have you seen that's been a great way to nurture new talent and then sort of get people excited about working in broadcast.
You're forced to be in education until you're at least 18 now. You almost have to choose something, where you want to go, between 16 and 18. Mm-hmm. If you don't necessarily fall right in the right course, that can be probably quite influential to your decisions. T-levels are a good option that I've seen people exploring. It's a very reasonably new. I think it's like a technical based qualification, equivalent to A-level, and that is something that broadcasters particularly could probably very well buy into, and production companies, of course.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then you've also got the likes of ITV Academy have been putting out applications for loads of apprenticeships and opportunities there, and it's been really interesting going to the different schools across the country and seeing the different opportunities that the young people get and how invested they already are within media. A lot of these young people are uploading to YouTube or watching YouTube videos. These kids are invested and they're engaged, but the curriculum doesn't shape them in a way to tailor them towards the broadcast industry. At some schools like Global Academy and UTC, the schools have a direct focus on media and dedicating hours of their curriculum to producing content and building studios. One of the key gaps that is trying to be built at the moment is, where do these young people go afterwards? How can we support them, if they don't want to go to university? What contacts have the broadcasters or the industry organisations got with the schools?
I do find one of the interesting things with the rise of YouTube and TikTok, and a lot of people who are content creators, they want to get their hands behind a camera. Different aspects of creating content, whether in front or behind the camera, there's so many more platforms to do that on. It's almost like there's an entirely new industry. While there is more content being produced and out there than ever before, there's more competition for those skills of people who want to actually create content. They could go anywhere. Whereas traditionally, years ago, where would you go? If you wanted to produce a piece of content, you would work for, in the UK, you would work for the BBC. That would be the dream. I'm zoning in on the BBC here for some reason, but, any broadcaster. If you look at different generations of people, what's like the dream job? And I think so many people, back in the space race, they'd want to be an astronaut, right? Or whatever the dream jobs are. I feel like so many people these days want to be influencers and content creators, but having control of their own business in a way, because that's what it is. You are operating your own business. That's why it's such a huge appeal, because you can just pick up a camera and create something straight away.
And people can do this on their own now, right? They can do it as a one-man band. They can film, they can edit, they can market, they can get it out there onto social platforms very easily. They don't need thousands of pounds to do a TV ad. And aside all of that, they can do it as a hobby. It can be a little side quest, whilst doing something else, which perhaps earn them more money than what being a runner would. You hear a lot of people saying, back in my day, we just used to knock on the door and go and get a job as a runner, and we'd work our way up. Perhaps people don't really want to do that anymore.
Maybe the answer is, it's so easy to pick up the camera and make content yourself for a platform like YouTube. So we need to make it easier to get into broadcast with that curriculum. The easier we make it to get into it, and the more sexy we make the broadcast industry seem to people, then the more they're going to want to go into those kind of jobs, right?
I think you've got a lot of people who are very, very talented and very gifted content creators who, if they wanted to step into something more structured, like a big organisation, then they could absolutely do that and use their previous content as a show reel and start scoping out jobs in that space and seeing what that looks like. The gap comes with the people who are building the studios. Everybody, wants to be a producer or a director. There's a gap of technical people. but steering people who want to be engineer and steering them into broadcast engineering. It's continuing to have diverse and exciting workforces. It's, you know, in the media industry, it's fun. It's how we embrace people's want for flexible working and better work-life balance. So I work condensed hours, which really, really works for me. It means that I can be a mum, and when I'm at work, I can be fully invested in work, but it means I get 3 days with my daughter. And I think the more we can be inclusive to those things, the more we can...
the more you'll retain talent.
Yeah.
Because they'll want to stay in that kind of job environment, I guess.
I mean, the whole industry is and every industry is focusing on diversity and inclusion. You know, it's not just something we're talking about in the broadcast industry, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But importantly, you know, you're not just talking about male and female. You're talking about people from different ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic, us northerners. No, but the broadcast industry has perhaps been, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of people will have stories from knowing X person or Y person as how they got into the industry. And it's not always going to be like that. So how we make it more accessible, we need to remove barriers to entry. You know, not everybody has a degree in engineering. And, you know, not everybody can afford to do an apprenticeship scheme if they've got a family at home. So how can we bring people in who want a career change in the middle of the career without a degree, or, you know, they might not have been able to afford it. And that's where I come back to this piece about, you know, socioeconomic stuff, is that, you know, if somebody can't afford that education, they can't afford to go to uni, well, you're ruling out a whole demographic there. In the same way, if a woman walks in a room and there's not a single woman there, and I'm only using that context because I am female and I feel, you know, able to use it, it makes you feel perhaps slightly uncomfortable. The more people are trying to tackle this, the more visibility there is, and the more people open their arms to everyone within the industry, and the more inclusive it becomes. I think you're only going to bring more people in, right?
Yeah, you have a wider pool to choose from. What are some of the important things we should be doing right now to resolve the skills crisis?
Get involved. There are numerous initiatives in the industry to get involved with, to bridge that gap, whether that be opening the door to apprenticeship schemes, whether that be taking young people in for work experience. We know it's not always easy. We know there are insurance documentation that says you can't have a young person in if you can't have someone in under 18, or we know they're working around expensive equipment. But find a way, get them in, get them seeing things, get them excited, and create a pathway, which is, you know, it's happening. It's starting to happen. It's not. I'm not raising this as an issue that's not already been raised. I'm talking about this because I'm seeing the movements in the industry. I'm seeing things happen, albeit probably not as quick as anybody would hope. Even in 6 years, I walk into a room now, there's queues. I mean, we talked about IBC. There's queues for the women's toilets. There's queues at DPP for the women's toilets. Like, that's a big thing. Like, you used to be able to go in and you had free choice of cubicle, and now there's queues. What
do you mean? There's queues always at women's toilets.
Not at broadcast industry events, there isn't. I don't want to look at this with blinkers on, because I feel quite very well embedded with the RISE community. For me, I might have a different view to somebody who perhaps is new in or hasn't discovered that yet. But for me, it feels like change is happening, and it's good and it's positive. I'm excited to be a part of it, but I also want to talk about it and want to get more people involved in it.
With these types of things, it's like it's a cultural shift. It's not something you can do overnight. It just has to be relentlessly pushed day in, day out, weeks, months, years.
It takes time.
Yeah.
You're not just going to get an influx of talent tomorrow and everybody knows what they're doing.
Solve all the problems with a click of your finger.
You know, you've got to have people on board. Training your staff who have been there 50 years, how to perhaps even just be patient with an 18-year-old who's asking stupid questions. Well, they're not stupid because you don't know what you don't know, right? Giving them the skills to be able to talk about what they do in a more relatable way. Have a focus on relationships, because that's what keeps people. They feel wanted if they're engaged, if they're learning. and they're doing what
Feel
they want
valued.
to do. They feel valued, yeah. Able, always reach out to the quietest person in the room because they have something to say as well. And giving them the space and the platform to be able to air their opinions is really, really important. But that is, that's one way you can be more inclusive. As a manager, you've got a team who are quite loud and ask a lot of questions and just being vocal, bringing the people who aren't.
I think that's true in a lot of aspects, because if you think of job interviews, and now I'm going to be careful what I say here, because I mean this in the best possible way. Some women who I have spoken to, so this is experiences, haven't applied for certain jobs because they feel like they're not qualified for it. It goes back to kind of confidence and then making sure, people feel valued in their skill set.
I think you can bring confidence back to having a good mentor and having a good team and network around you, helping you navigate day-to-day stuff, which is probably a bit more personal. Reaching out for a mentor, they're so important. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. If you look back at perhaps how it might have used to be, business happens down the pub, and, in the past where we are in a very male industry and predominantly men going down to the pub, the mentorship might have happened in a much more informal way.
Right.
But it was still happening.
Yeah.
We're very lucky that the females in the industry have the opportunity to perhaps reach out and do the Rise mentoring scheme where they wouldn't have had that before.
How do we make sure, as an industry, we're providing equal opportunities for everyone who might not necessarily want to build those connections in the pub? There are lots of reasons why people might not want to, drink alcohol, whether that's for religious reasons or whether that's because you can't, because you've got commitments. Maybe you're a full-time mum. Maybe you don't have the opportunity to stay around the office after 5 o'clock. There's lots of different reasons for different people. How do we make sure everyone gets the same opportunities? Not just for getting mentors, but maybe that's even for getting promotions. How do we be more inclusive? We have
to identify it, right, as an issue. And I'm sure this isn't the first time it's been mentioned. We have to acknowledge our peers and our colleagues who are very, very good at what they do, and bring them into the conversation afterwards in a way where we were thinking about you, or we were thinking this. What do you if you have had a conversation down the pub, bring them into it. Don't just draw a line under it, leave it there. Bring it back and make them feel sort of included. So we have networking events, right?
Yeah.
Everything's branded as a networking event. And 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.5 times out of 10, there's always alcohol. Try paying a bit more attention to the people you're with and are they drinking alcohol? And the peer pressure can sometimes be a little bit, why are you going? It's not, it shouldn't be like that. It should be great to see you, have a great evening. We should take this expectation away that it has to be all party.
I really struggle with this, because I think on one hand, I've not only made from work some of the closest friends I have, which in a way is down to going out and having a good time, and that generally includes alcohol. Now, people get to really know you in those kind of informal environments. We can kind of try to be unbiased, and you can try to give everyone the same opportunities, but there's something to be said of you're present, you're there, you're in people's minds, you're showing up, and because I've now had this conversation with you, I think you'd be great for that. I've spoken to you in this informal environment. We've had this conversation. How do you truly, authentically give people the same opportunities outside of that environment?
So actually, funnily enough, I think one thing that we could really draw on here is I think M&B has made a real effort with this over the past probably 4 years. Our Christmas parties used to be very much typical Christmas parties, go for a big free course, as you Southerners call it, dinner, and
dinner.
And have a really big party. And, that has subtly changed over the past few years to being to an activity, to a group activity that is inclusive of those who perhaps feel more comfortable not in a bar, even though there's a bar attached, so the people who do want to drink and want to let their hair down that way can do. But it's also letting people who, I can be there, but there's a purpose to be there that doesn't involve drinking. So we've done bowling, we've done, doing clay
pigeon shooting, but virtually, not real pigeons.
Something, clay.
Yeah, I'm not that southern.
I've not done it before, it sounds fun. But there are ways that you can open things up to your teams where they can get involved, and it doesn't just have to be at Christmas, right? We play softball in the summer. Another great way to get people together and engaging. And I think that's probably a start of it, I think allowing teams more time to team building, and perhaps even start doing cross-industry stuff. I don't know why I've got this in my head. Perhaps it's not quite right, but I know that I think M&B used to play football against a bunch of suppliers, Cisco, things like that. And I know we used to play football, and it was always noticed, only sort of female on the team.
Was that you?
Obviously, yeah. I'll play football with anyone who'll kick a football with me. It's finding, softball's a nice little middle ground, but it's finding those things throughout the year. If it's perhaps not just once a year thing, maybe, it's hard to do these things regularly. But it's definitely bringing people together is important. I don't know how that looks. Well, after a big industry event, we just go for a kickabout.
Definitely not after alcohol. I do not want to play football after, 3 glasses of red. It's just not going to go down well.
Maybe the networking event happens
during 9 to 5?
Not even so. Yes, it could do. But maybe it happens down at some virtual baseball range or somewhere that has an activity where people can get involved.
So my next set of questions are about inclusivity and specifically neurodiversity. You've officially been diagnosed with ADHD. I suspect heavily that I also have ADHD. However, NHS waiting list. I want to know personally, because this personally impacts me as well, and you're further along on this journey than I am. How has the diagnosis helped you, not just personal life, but in the workplace environment? What kind of work adjustments, if any, have been made as a result of that diagnosis?
So it's been life-changing, truly. To be misdiagnosed for 13 years with anxiety and depression is very intense because you start to wonder, will I ever be happy again? And when you get it, it gives you a new sense of freedom. The only way I can describe it is by being put behind sort of I don't know how you drive a submarine, but let's say a wheel of a submarine. And no idea, or a spacecraft, no idea how to drive it. And as the minute you're given that instruction manual, all of a sudden you can start to figure it out. I mean, you can play and you can tinker with it, but, without the instructions, but you're not going to be as successful if you've got a guide or an understanding of how to drive this ship. And I
like the analogy.
We went from a submarine to a spacecraft to a ship all in one go, I think I often saw myself as highly emotional, and I never really understood why. And everything always felt very intense and very painful and very raw. Once you start to understand why these things are happening, you can take the emotion away. So once you start to go, oh, actually, something sort of heavily associated with ADHD is RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And that basically means that if I get in my head that, I've made one minor mistake, completely something that makes absolutely no difference to anything that's happened, just something minor. And in the past, that would have been something that would have been very triggering for me. and I would have believed that everyone was going to be talking about it, and I genuinely would believe that everybody hated me. And that would make me withdraw from situations. It would make me want to, it brings out fight or flight. This is where the anxiety comes from. Makes you want to run away. It makes you scared to make that mistake again. Once you can identify with that and you can say, oh, okay, people probably don't hate me, and this hurts right now, but what can I do to sort of try and like reason or level, or what conversations can I have with people to rationalise it? How can I not keep it inside me? But that impacts your life so heavily that everything else that comes with it is it impacts the rest of the workday, your workload, your family life, and regulating that is very, very difficult if you don't know how. Being diagnosed and having an understanding that this is who I am makes me far more accepting of that, and I am a lot kinder to myself, but not only to myself, a lot kinder to others as well. For me, it's become a part of like life isn't what happens to me, but how I react to it. And, the RSD is just one example. I could literally do a whole podcast on ADHD.
Yeah.
It's so important to me.
I mean, another example is like one of the obvious ones is paying attention, like focus.
Yeah.
I would pretend that I listened just by filling in the gaps of what was said, but I actually wasn't listening because an email came in and I saw that subject line and I was just like, what? And it just distracted me from what someone was saying. But now that I know, actually, I'm more easily distracted than other people, I feel comfortable asking the question, can you just repeat that? You have a get out of jail free card you can kind of whip out where
hiding your distractions.
Yeah.
Start to mute the distractions. Start to put yourself in different environments. Come into the office and then I'm like, hi, great to see everybody. I've got way too much to say to every single one of you, so I'm going to run away to an office or to a room and I'm going to sit on my own and do what I need to do until I don't need to do it anymore because there's too much noise here, or I'll listen to music, or you find coping strategies. And by having a diagnosis, it doesn't mean it means a lot, but it doesn't change who you are fundamentally.
It doesn't resolve them.
No.
It just helps you
understand them. And how they can really be there for you. I was very, very lucky that my manager gave me everything I needed as a person, as a human, prior to diagnosis. And actually, when I got even a sniff that I could have it and everything started making sense, I rang him straight away. And I said, look, this is a thing. And within a week, he'd done a training course on how to support team members who are neurodiverse, specifically ADHD. And he came back and he said, I'm not a doctor. I'll never forget. But everything, all of the symptoms that kind of came up, I would tend to agree with you. You probably have it. Is there anything I can do? And at that point I was like, well, actually, you already do everything that you could do anyway. As I say, I'm very lucky to be in that position. Not everybody has that, but... So
that was one of your workplace adjustments, is making sure...
It's having somebody where you can be vulnerable. The most important thing, it's important to acknowledge neurodiversity, and maybe this possibly won't be a popular thing to say, but I think there is value in everybody acknowledging strategies that help them cope better, and for managers to be diverse in their people management. I don't think there is not ever a one size fits all. It's not you're either neurodiverse or you're not. And that's not saying that everybody's on the scale. What it's saying is that everybody has their own way of working. And to implement strategies in the workplace where managers can be flexible and I'm not saying, like, they're not mind readers. They don't have to be mind readers. But creating a workforce of people who can, as adults, identify their needs and their way they work best is very healthy. And not only for a business, but for individuals as well. Because it's really empowering to go, I'm not going to put myself in that situation because that makes me feel very uncomfortable. And actually, you'll get the most out of me if we do X, Y, and Z. Some people might go, I'm a manager, we're here to make money, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I'm not saying anybody said that. As a manager, you have a duty of care to support the people that work into you. And if you want to get the best value out of them, then my belief is you need to create a workplace that really, really reflects them and who they are and what they're about and how they learn best. What do they need in order to function? And I'm very, very lucky that I've got that. That really encourages me to be productive and to be engaged. Individuals taking responsibility and understanding the way they work best. Managers being open to receiving that information and to supporting their teams in a way they can. And workplaces make reasonable adjustments, right? All of this stuff is already available. There's not going to be anything new or groundbreaking here. I think what it's doing is it's expanding this sort of conversation of, I feel really, really empowered to have understand my brain and to understand me. And I don't think that just happens just because you got, an ADHD diagnosis. I think that happens because you start to understand fundamentally what makes you tick, how do you work, how do you function. And I think that's important for everybody, not just for someone with adulthood diagnosis.
When it comes to incorporating neurodiverse people into the workplace, how does businesses, leaders, managers ensure that they're sort of optimising their full potential so they can work their best?
I think it comes back to and every workplace and every school has to facilitate reasonable adjustments. And I honestly couldn't comment on what they look like with interview process and things like that. I genuinely don't know. It's not something I've been privy to. But I know they exist, and I know that businesses will generally provide it. And it's about being open and communicating. And so for leaders and managers, it's about creating that space there where people can be vulnerable. There is strength in vulnerability, right? Because acknowledging where you're not your strongest is hard. It's hard saying I was wrong. It's hard saying I'm not very good at this, and I would like to be better. And here's what I've done. Put a plan in place, and support. There's to every problem there's always a solution. Always. If you're neurodiverse, if you have something that makes life harder for you, and that doesn't have to be neurodiversity. It can be a disability. It can be a problem at home. It can be anything. If you can be open and honest with that, and you've got a team around you who are supportive and receptive, you can make a plan and you can make things feel better. Realising that everybody that is an employee number in any organisation is also a person with feelings.
Yeah, so that's unfortunately all we have time for today. We was going to talk about sustainability, but as Tasha does, has gone on a complete tangent thanks to her ADHD. I mean, I probably didn't help either.